The Galactic Council had arrived, and the people of Earth didn't know what to expect. For centuries, humans had looked at the stars with curiosity, imagining that far-off civilizations existed. But most had assumed those civilizations would never notice a small blue planet tucked away in the Milky Way. Now, that assumption had been proven wrong. Ships larger than any city hovered above the atmosphere, their surfaces glinting with colors humans had never seen. The Council's presence was meant to be terrifying, a display of power to remind humanity of its place in the universe. Inside a secure command center, humans watched the massive fleet in silence. Military officers, scientists, and leaders were all there, yet there was no panic. There were gasps of awe, yes, but no fear. Every human there had grown up in a world where survival had been hard, where disasters, challenges, and conflicts had taught them to adapt. And now, as the Council broadcast their message to Earth, a calm confidence settled over the people. The holographic message from the Council was designed to intimidate. It showed alien forms that were taller, stronger, and stranger than anything humans had seen. Their voices boomed in multiple languages simultaneously, each one asserting the superiority of the Council and the futility of resistance. We are the keepers of order in this galaxy. You are insignificant. You will comply with our evaluation. The tone was not a request. It was a demand wrapped in a cold clinical warning. Yet humans responded differently than the Council expected. Instead of trembling or retreating, they analyzed every detail. Scientists recorded the shapes, textures, and movements of the alien forms. Strategists debated the possible weaknesses in the Council's displays of power. And the leaders, calm and composed, began formulating a response that was both polite and firm. The Council had assumed that humans, like most species they encountered, would react with fear. They did not understand that humans were apex predators in their own world, shaped by evolution to survive against challenges that seemed impossible. Lions, wolves, giant sharks, even harsh planets had tested humans for millennia. They had learned to hunt, to strategize, to work together, and to adapt. The Council, looking only at technology and not at history, had missed the most important fact. Humans were born fighters, and they had never known submission as a default instinct. A small delegation of humans was chosen to meet the Council. They were not soldiers, not diplomats in the traditional sense. They were humans who represented Earth's adaptability, thinkers, observers, problem solvers. As their ship approached the Council's massive command vessel, the delegation could see the intricate details of alien construction. Every surface pulsed with energy. Every shape seemed deliberately designed to impress or frighten. Inside the Council's chamber, the aliens awaited them. Their forms were intimidating tall, with limbs that bent in ways humans had never seen, skin that shimmered unnaturally, eyes that glowed with intelligence and authority. The delegation walked in slowly, calmly, taking in every detail. There was no hesitation in their steps, no sign of awe that could be mistaken for fear. The Council tried to assert dominance, speaking in booming tones, moving with deliberate grace meant to project power. The humans responded with direct questions. They asked about the Council's purpose, their intentions, their rules. They did not bow or avert their gaze. They spoke clearly, without arrogance, but also without fear. Each question, each observation, subtly challenged the assumptions the Council had made. The aliens found themselves thrown off balance. They were used to other species that would freeze, cower, or flee. But here were humans, calm and steady, observing them as if the aliens themselves were a natural phenomenon too. B studied behind the scenes. Some of the Council members whispered among themselves. "Why aren't they afraid?" one asked. Another replied, "Perhaps they are primitive, but they do not react as expected. Something is unusual about them." The delegation noticed these whispers. and they understood without needing to interfere. Humans had always been skilled at reading not only words, but intentions, reading subtleties that others missed. The meeting continued, and the council attempted subtle intimidation. They projected images of other worlds they had conquered, species they had subdued, disasters they had created. Each display was meant to shock the humans, to make them feel powerless. But the humans remained composed, asking questions that revealed keen insight and careful reasoning. One member of the delegation pointed out logistical questions about these conquered worlds, subtly demonstrating that humans could see beyond mere spectacle as the council displayed their technological superiority. Humans quietly analyzed it. They noted patterns in energy use, in structural design, and in communication protocols. What the council did not realize was that humans could adapt quickly. Observing and learning were second nature. What looked like awe or curiosity to the council was actually rapid data gathering. Within hours, the delegation understood more about the council's systems than many of the council's own species had expected them to. There was a moment when a council representative moved closer, intending to loom over the humans and demonstrate dominance. Humans did not flinch. One of them raised a hand in a polite gesture and spoke clearly, calmly, without raising their voice. "We understand your power. We also ask that you understand our perspective. Threats do not impress us. Knowledge does." The words were simple, but the effect was profound. The council had never encountered a species that could respond to intimidation with such composure and clarity. Outside the chamber, Earth watched the exchange unfold. News feeds, broadcast across the planet, showed humans meeting the council for the first time. People everywhere felt a strange mix of pride and relief. Pride because humanity was not shrinking under pressure, and relief because the delegation was handling a situation that could have gone horribly wrong. Across the globe, millions of humans felt a renewed sense of unity. For the first time, it seemed Earth was being seen not as a small, insignificant planet, but as a species that might command respect. Back on the council ships, tensions were rising. Some aliens began to question their assumptions. "Perhaps these humans are more dangerous than we thought," one whispered. Another shook their head. "No, they are still primitive. They could not possibly match our strength." Yet doubt had been planted. Humans' calm demeanor, their analytical minds, their fearlessness, these were traits that even the most powerful council members could not ignore. As the delegation returned to their ship, they carried with them more than data. They carried the quiet confidence of a species that had survived against all odds. They knew that the council's intimidation tactics had failed, but they also knew this was only the beginning. Humans had always thrived in situations where others doubted them. And now, faced with a galaxy that assumed they were weak, they were about to show that their strength was not just physical or technological. It was in their resilience, their intelligence, and their unyielding will to survive. The council had arrived expecting to dominate. They had expected fear. Instead, they found calm, sharp minds and quiet strength. They had assumed humans would be easy to control. What they did not know, what they could not yet comprehend, was that humans were apex predators not just on Earth, but in ways that extended far beyond the simple measure of power as Earth's. Delegation looked back at the alien fleet. They were already planning their next steps. They knew they had a chance to change the council's perception of humanity, to show that intimidation would not work. The first meeting had been a test, and humans had passed. Calm, intelligent, composed, they had survived the first challenge, without ever raising a weapon. But the real journey was just beginning. Above all, humans had sent a clear message. They were not afraid. And sometimes in the universe, fearlessness is the first step toward being recognized as a true predator. The first meeting had ended, but the tension in the galaxy had only just begun. Humans returned to Earth with a sense of cautious pride. They had faced the Council's intimidation and emerged calm, composed, and unshaken. On the Council ships, however, the story was very different. The aliens had expected fear, hesitation, perhaps even submission, but all they had seen was calm observation and quiet confidence. That was unfamiliar to them, and for the first time, some members of the Council felt a ripple of doubt. The Council's next move was subtle but deliberate. They could not openly threaten humans again without risking embarrassment, yet they needed to test the species' limits. So they decided to escalate their psychological tactics. They created holographic environments meant to simulate the most extreme situations a species could face. Natural disasters, hostile predators, and impossible terrain, all of it was designed to unsettle the human delegation. Humans approached the test as they approached everything, with careful observation and steady curiosity. In a simulation where massive storms tore through landscapes, humans assessed the storm patterns and calculated safe zones. When a holographic predator appeared, designed to intimidate and confuse, humans observed its movement, identified its weaknesses, and planned escape routes. They did not panic. They did not scream. They simply adapted. The aliens watching this were both fascinated and disturbed. They had never seen a species respond so efficiently under pressure. Every other civilization they had tested would display fear. Some would panic, and most would make errors that allowed the Council to assert control. Humans, on the other hand, were calm and precise. Every action had a purpose. Every decision was thoughtful. It was as if nothing could shake them. Inside the command centers on Earth, the human delegation reported what they had observed. They spoke in simple, clear language, avoiding technical jargon that might confuse others. Their observations were precise, but they also conveyed something the Council could not see. Humans had an instinct for survival that went beyond calculation. They understood danger deeply and respected it, but they never allowed it to control them. The Council tried other strategies. They created illusions of vast power, displays of alien weaponry and technology meant to overwhelm the human senses. Ships that could obliterate cities, drones that moved faster than the eye could track, and energy fields that distorted reality, all designed to provoke fear. Yet humans continued to respond with calm analysis. They noted patterns, calculated probabilities, and even identified flaws that the Council had assumed were invisible. One member of the delegation, standing quietly in the observation chamber, spoke up. "These simulations are impressive," they said, "but if the goal is to understand humans, then it is failing. Fear will not make us more vulnerable. Knowledge and clarity will." Their words were simple, but the message was clear. Intimidation could not control humans. The Council was perplexed. Some members began arguing among themselves. "We cannot underestimate them," one said. "They are primitive, yes, but something about their response is unsettling." Another replied, "They have no respect for power as we know it. That could be dangerous." For the first time, the Council realized that humans did not respond to fear the way other species did. Fear was a tool, and most species obeyed it instinctively. Humans were not like that. Meanwhile, Earth's leaders worked quietly behind the scenes. They were aware of the Council's power, yet they were not naive. Humans had a long history of facing threats much larger than themselves, storms that destroyed entire regions, predators that hunted relentlessly, and rival tribes that threatened their existence. This history had taught them one thing: survival was never about showing fearlessness alone. It was about observation, adaptation, and strategy. As the Council increased the intensity of their tests, humans continued to excel. When simulations created impossible mazes filled with traps, humans found paths that even the designers had not anticipated. When they were confronted with holographic predators, that moved with unpredictable patterns. Humans learned their rhythms and anticipated their moves. Each test, meant to intimidate, only revealed the human's ability to think, adapt, and cooperate. The Council could not understand it. In their history, power had always been enough. When a species was faced with overwhelming force, they either submitted or failed. Humans, however, seemed to operate on a different principle. They respected danger, they studied it, and they used it to grow stronger. The aliens began to sense that humans were not merely survivors, they were problem solvers, strategists and innovators in real time. One night, after hours of observation, a group of Council scientists gathered in private. "We have underestimated them," one said quietly. "They do not act as we expected. They do not fear. They do not submit. They adapt. They anticipate. They survive against odds we consider extreme." Another added, "Perhaps we are facing not a primitive species, but something entirely new, something dangerous." The humans themselves were unaware of much of the Council's internal debate. They were focused on learning, on understanding the motives and capabilities of the aliens. Every question they asked, every detail they noted, revealed a species that had been forced to survive against impossible challenges. On Earth, humans had lived alongside predators larger, faster, and stronger than themselves. They had built tools, shelters, and strategies to overcome every obstacle. That history, ingrained over millennia, made them uniquely suited to face the unknown without fear. When the Council tried a final psychological tactic, humans responded in a way that left the aliens stunned. Holographic projections of disaster planets, exploding, civilizations falling, entire species disappearing, were meant to show the futility of resistance. The human delegation watched quietly, noting patterns and asking calm, precise questions. One of them said, "Even in extreme danger, there are always options. The key is to understand them, not to panic." That statement, so simple and natural, resonated among some Council members. For the first time, they questioned whether their strategy of fear would work at all. Humans were not responding emotionally. They were responding strategically. They were observing, learning, and adapting in real time. The Council realized that humans had a type of intelligence and resilience that was unlike anything they had. Encountered dot as days turned into weeks, the humans continued to participate in the tests, never breaking composure, never showing submission. They collaborated seamlessly, dividing tasks, analyzing information, and predicting outcomes. Every interaction revealed their adaptability, their courage, and their ability to remain calm under pressure. Humans were teaching the Council a lesson without even trying, that fear alone could not control a species that understood survival, strategy, and cooperation. In private discussions, some Council members admitted what they could not say publicly. "We have misjudged them," one whispered. "This is not a species to be intimidated. They are more than we expected." Another replied, "Yes, and that makes them dangerous. Not in a destructive way yet, but in ways that could change the balance of power if we are careless." On Earth, the human delegation returned from the tests with a clear sense of their position. They had learned about the Council's methods, their technology, and their expectations. But more importantly, they had learned that their calm, strategic approach could neutralize fear and turn intimidation into observation. Humans had faced countless dangers on their own planet, and now, in the face of an entire galaxy, they relied on the same principles: stay calm, analyze, adapt, survive. The Council's attempts at intimidation had failed, and they could sense it. Their own members whispered of danger, of the unpredictable nature of humans. And yet, they did not openly confront this fear, for admitting weakness would be a scandal among their peers. The humans, meanwhile, had strengthened their position simply by being themselves calm, observant, and confident without arrogance. As part 2 drew to a close, the stage was set for the next encounter. The council, shaken by humans' unusual reactions, would need to reconsider their approach. And humans, steady as ever, prepared to continue their observation, ready to adapt to whatever challenges came next. One thing was clear: the galaxy had assumed it could intimidate humans, but humans had already demonstrated that they were not only survivors, they were apex predators in a way the Council had yet to understand. The first shocks had passed, and humans had proven one fundamental truth: fear was not a tool that worked on them. They had survived disasters, predators, and rivals on Earth, and they had learned to respond with intelligence and strategy. Now, facing the galaxy, they were ready to show that their strength lay not just in technology or weapons, but in the young, calm, clear mind of a species that refused to be shaken. And somewhere in the Council's fleet, doubt continued to grow. Humans were no longer just observers. They were competitors, unpredictable and unafraid. The lesson was beginning to sink in. Intimidation had failed, and the real test of humans was only just beginning. After the initial tests and simulations, the Council began to realize that humans were far more unusual than they had ever imagined. At first, they had dismissed Earth as a minor planet with a primitive species, but now evidence was mounting that humans were not just survivors, they were exceptional. The Council's scientists and strategists started digging deeper into humanity's past, trying to understand what made them so resilient, so calm under pressure, so capable of adapting to challenges that would break almost any other species. First discovery surprised many members of the Council. Humans were apex predators on their planet. Unlike many species in the galaxy, which relied on instinct and overwhelming power, humans had learned to survive and dominate through intelligence, cooperation, and endurance. From the savannas to the forests, from the mountains to the oceans, humans had faced countless dangers, yet they had not only survived, they had thrived. The Council's biologists pored over the data. Early humans had hunted large animals using strategy rather than strength. They had coordinated in groups, created tools and weapons, and developed tactics that allowed them to take down creatures far stronger than themselves. Wolves, lions, bears, and even massive sea predators had been no match for humans' ingenuity. The Council began to understand something vital. Humans did not rely solely on physical strength. They relied on observation, analysis, and cleverness. This insight caused a stir among the Council's members. Some were concerned. If they are apex predators on their planet, then underestimating them is dangerous, one warned. Another replied, they are primitive compared to us, but their ability to survive extreme threats is unsettling. The Council had faced many species that were strong or fast or clever, but humans combined all of these qualities with a resilience and adaptability that was rare even among the galaxy's most feared civilizations. Humans had also survived in environments that were brutally unforgiving. Deserts that burned under a scorching sun, forests filled with predators, oceans teeming with creatures that could devour them. All these environments had shaped humanity over thousands of years. They had built shelters, developed medicine, and learned to work together to survive. Unlike many species, humans had no natural advantages in speed, size, or raw power. They had compensated with intelligence, cooperation, and strategy. The Council noticed patterns that worried them. In simulations designed to test humans, the humans' responses mirrored strategies that had been effective for centuries on their planet. When faced with a predator or a natural disaster, humans observed carefully, identified weaknesses, and coordinated responses that increased their chance of survival. It was instinctive, yet sophisticated, a combination the Council had not anticipated. Reports from the delegation added to the Council's unease. Humans had quietly asked questions that revealed they understood risk and opportunity. They were curious about the Council's technology, yes, but also about the logic behind their decisions, the way their society functioned, and the vulnerabilities that even advanced civilizations had. They were learning faster than the Council expected, and their observations were subtle but precise. Humans were absorbing information not to challenge the Council outright, but to understand it deeply. The Council decided to conduct further studies. They accessed Earth's historical records, analyzing every period of human development, from hunting and gathering to the creation of agriculture, from tribal conflicts to the rise of cities. They traced humanity's evolution. What they saw was consistent. Humans had survived every challenge, adapted to every environment, and emerged stronger each time. Every time a threat seemed insurmountable, humans had found a way to overcome it. One council member commented in private, their history is one of constant adaptation. They have faced predators, rivals, and disasters that would have wiped out almost any other species. And yet, here they are. Another nodded, adding, it is not just survival. They learn from their experiences. They improve. They innovate. That is why they are so dangerous in ways we did not anticipate. Humans' predator instincts extended beyond simple survival. They were strategic thinkers, capable of analyzing a situation from multiple angles, predicting outcomes, and coordinating actions with precision. In conflicts, humans had learned to combine speed, endurance, and intelligence in ways that made them highly effective. They could plan, anticipate, and adapt simultaneously, a combination that few species in the galaxy could match. The Council began to rethink their earlier assumptions. They had assumed that humans would be intimidated, that fear could control them. Instead, humans had demonstrated a remarkable ability to observe, analyze, and remain calm under pressure. The very traits that had allowed them to survive on Earth were now proving that they could stand against threats far greater than anything on their planet. Meanwhile, the human delegation continued their interactions with the Council. They had noticed the subtle tension among the aliens and quietly adjusted their approach. They were respectful but firm, curious but cautious. Every question they asked, every observation they made, was part of a larger strategy to understand the Council's intentions. They were learning just as the Council was learning about them, but humans had an advantage that the aliens could not fully comprehend. They were fearless in the face of uncertainty, and they trusted their own judgment. The Council's leaders began to realize that intimidation had failed because humans did not operate on fear alone. Fear could influence behavior, yes, but humans had evolved to use fear as information, not as a control mechanism. They studied threats, learned from them, and adapted their strategies accordingly. The aliens were beginning to see that humanity's strength was not just in their physical abilities or technology. It was in their ability to think, to adapt, and to survive in the face of overwhelming odds. One scientist among the Council muttered, almost to themselves, they are predators in a way we did not anticipate, not because they are stronger than us, but because they survive. They adapt, they learn, and they do not fear. The words hung in the room, unsettling the other members. The Council had met intelligent species before, some aggressive, some cunning, but humans combined these traits with an instinctive resilience that made them unpredictable, and that unpredictability was dangerous. Humans' resilience was evident in their social structures as well. Even in small groups, it demonstrated cooperation that was precise, organized, and effective. They shared knowledge, assigned tasks based on skill, and coordinated efforts in ways that maximized their chances of survival. On Earth, these traits had allowed humans to overcome predators, rivals, and environmental challenges alike. The Council began to understand that these same traits were now being applied in the interstellar context. The more the council learned, the more cautious they became. They realized that humans' history of survival had given them more than physical and mental skills. It had given them confidence. Humans trusted their judgment, relied on their observations, and adapted to threats without hesitation. They were not reckless, but they were unafraid, and that combination made them incredibly effective. Humans had also survived through innovation. On Earth, they had invented tools, weapons, and technologies to overcome challenges. They had learned to cooperate across distances, communicate ideas, and solve problems in real time. These skills, developed over millennia, were now being applied in a new arena: interstellar relations. With a council that assumed they would be easy to control, the council began to recognize a pattern. Every species they had encountered relied on instinct or fear or sheer power to survive. Humans relied on none of these alone. They relied on intelligence, cooperation, adaptability, and persistence. They were not the fastest, the strongest, or the most technologically advanced, yet they were remarkably difficult to predict or control. That unpredictability made them far more dangerous than any species the council had faced. The human delegation, meanwhile, continued to engage with the council in a calm, methodical way. They asked questions, shared observations, and demonstrated their understanding without revealing all they knew. Every interaction reinforced a subtle but powerful message. Humans were not to be underestimated. They could observe, learn, and adapt faster than anyone expected, and they were patient enough to wait for the right moment to act. As the study of humans progressed, the council slowly began to adjust their strategies. They stopped relying on intimidation alone and started considering negotiation, observation, and cooperation. They realized that humans were not easily swayed by threats, but they were responsive to reason, logic, and clear communication. The council had to respect humans' intelligence, their resilience, and their ability to survive in the most extreme circumstances. In private discussions, some members admitted what others refused to say openly. "We underestimated them," one whispered. "They are not a species to control. They survive, they adapt, and they do not fear. That makes them dangerous." Another nodded, adding, "We must proceed carefully. Humans are not just another species. They are apex predators in a way we did not anticipate, and that changes everything." By the end of this phase, the council had learned a vital lesson. Humans were not to be intimidated or underestimated. Their past, their instincts, and they're his. The council thought they had finally found a way to assert control. After weeks of observing humans, analyzing their history, and attempting subtle intimidation, they decided to take a more direct approach. They would send automated drones into human space, advanced machines designed to test human reactions, and, if necessary, demonstrate the council's superiority. These drones were faster than any spacecraft humans had built, stronger than any ship, and armed with technology that could disable entire cities with a single strike. The council believed this would finally prove Earth's vulnerability. When the drones first appeared, humans were not surprised. Scientists on Earth had predicted the possibility, and military teams were already prepared for a wide range of contingencies. People watched as sleek, alien machines glided through the atmosphere, their movements precise and threatening. The council expected panic, chaos, and a show of fear, but what they saw instead was calm, organized, and deliberate human action. Human engineers quickly analyzed the drones. They noted the patterns of movement, the energy sources powering them, and the potential weaknesses in their design. Within hours, humans had developed strategies to neutralize the threat. Some teams focused on disabling the drone's navigation systems. Others aimed to interrupt their energy supply, and a few prepared countermeasures that used simple principles of physics and clever engineering. Every action was coordinated, precise, and calm. The council watched in disbelief. Every other species they had ever encountered would have panicked under such circumstances. Entire civilizations had crumbled when faced with similar tests. Yet humans moved methodically, like predators, assessing prey. They were not reckless, and they were not afraid. They were deliberate, intelligent, and efficient. The aliens could not understand it. As the first drones moved closer to major cities, humans executed their plan. Using a combination of electromagnetic pulses, well-placed energy disruptors, and rapid strategic maneuvers, they disabled the drones one by one. Each drone fell from the sky without causing harm, deactivated by systems humans had designed in a matter of hours. The aliens had intended to intimidate, but they had only revealed their own assumptions, and the humans had exploited every one of them. The council's representatives were shocked. How are they doing this so quickly? One asked, voice tense. Another replied, it is impossible. They should not be able to neutralize our drones. They are adapting. The realization began to sink in. Humans were not just surviving. The challenge, they were mastering it. Their ability to observe, analyze, and respond in real time was unlike anything the council had seen. The humans themselves worked quietly, without drama or shouting. Teams communicated efficiently, sharing observations and coordinating their actions. Even civilians played a role, providing support, information, and assistance where needed. On Earth, humans had always relied on cooperation in times of crisis. And now that instinct was evident on a planetary scale. The calm, organized response was a demonstration of a species that had learned to thrive under pressure, not crumble under it. Some of the council's younger members began to feel fear for the first time. They had studied human history and noted their resilience, but now they were witnessing it firsthand. These were not untrained or weak beings. They were intelligent, adaptive, and relentless when faced with a challenge. Even the most advanced technology of the council was being countered with precision and ingenuity. One of the humans on Earth's command team made a quiet observation that summarized the situation perfectly. They assume power equals control. They said, but we have learned that observation, adaptation, and teamwork are stronger than any display of force. They will see that soon enough. The statement, simple and clear, reflected the mindset that had kept humans alive for millennia. They did not rely on intimidation, but on understanding and strategy. The council attempted a second wave, sending faster, more heavily armed drones. Their movements were more erratic, their attacks more aggressive, designed to test human nerves. The humans adjusted their approach. Immediately, new defensive measures were deployed, countering every variation the drones attempted. Each time, humans learned from the previous encounters, improving their strategies, anticipating weaknesses, and remaining calm. As the drones fell one by one, the council began to realize the full extent of their miscalculation. They had assumed that fear, size, and advanced technology would guarantee submission. Humans had turned those assumptions against them, using observation, intelligence, and calm resolve to survive and to dominate the encounter. The council's arrogance had blinded them to the true nature of human strength, their ability to remain steady, think critically, and act decisively under pressure. Even the civilian population on Earth played a role. Engineers, technicians, and volunteers supported the efforts, sharing information and assisting in strategies. Hospitals, communication networks, and transportation systems adapted rapidly to keep everything running. Humans had survived natural disasters, wars, and pandemics through cooperation and innovation, and those same skills were now applied to a threat that came from beyond the stars. The council's leadership was in disarray. Some argued for retreat, suggesting that humans were unpredictable and dangerous. Others insisted on continuing their tests, believing that humans would eventually break. But the evidence was clear. Humans were not only adapting, they were thriving. Every test intended to intimidate had revealed human ingenuity, resourcefulness, and courage. One alien observer commented quietly, "They are not reacting out of fear. They are learning. Every failure we present them becomes a lesson, and they improve immediately. This is alarming." Another agreed, "We are facing a species that does not respond to threats the way we expect. They survive, they adapt, and they do not falter. That makes them formidable." Humans, meanwhile, did not celebrate their success openly. They were focused on learning from the encounter, understanding the drones, and preparing for whatever came next. They respected the threat, but they did not fear it. Every action was measured, every decision deliberate. The Council, observing this, began to understand that fearlessness was only part of the story. Humans combined fearlessness with intelligence, adaptation, and coordination traits that made them uniquely capable of surviving challenges that would destroy most other species. As the day ended, the skies cleared of the remaining drones, and the humans stood calm, ready for the next phase. They had survived the Council's provocation without a single casualty, and had neutralized threats far beyond what the aliens had expected. Their calm, methodical approach had turned intimidation into a test of human capability, and humans had passed with remarkable skill. The Council had learned a harsh lesson. Intimidation alone could not control humans. They had underestimated a species that had evolved to survive extreme challenges through observation, adaptation, and teamwork. Humans did not act recklessly, but they acted decisively. They did not fear the unknown. They studied it, learned from it, and used it to their advantage. In private meetings, the Council's leaders began to reconsider their approach. Some admitted quietly that humans might be dangerous in ways the galaxy had not anticipated. They were intelligent, adaptive, and capable of operating under extreme pressure. They were not just survivors. They were problem solvers, innovators, and strategists. And most unsettling of all, they did not respond to intimidation. The human delegation, calm and composed, prepared for further interactions with the Council. They knew the aliens had expected fear, submission, and hesitation, and they had shown none of these. Every observation, every calculated move had reinforced one truth. Humans were apex predators in their own right, capable of responding to threats with intelligence and strategy, not panic. As night fell over Earth, the people reflected on what had happened. Across the planet, humans had faced a threat far beyond anything in their history, and they had risen to the challenge. The Council had assumed that size, technology, and intimidation were enough to control them. Instead, humans had shown the true power of their species: resilience, adaptability, intelligence, and calm resolve. The Council now faced a choice. They could continue attempts at intimidation, which had clearly failed, or they could begin to understand the humans they had underestimated. One thing was certain: humans had proven themselves capable of surviving, adapting, and thriving in circumstances that would overwhelm almost any other species. The galaxy had assumed it could provoke fear. Humans had shown that they were unshakable, and somewhere in the Council's fleet, unease spread. A species they had expected to control with technology and size had shown them something far more difficult to confront: intelligence, resilience, and calm under pressure. Humans had survived the provocation without panic, without aggression, but with complete mastery of the situation. They had turned a test of intimidation into proof of their strength. The lesson was clear. Even if the Council had not fully admitted it, humans were not a species to underestimate. Their calm, strategic responses, their ability to learn and adapt, and their refusal to yield to fear made them a force that could not be ignored. The Council had provoked humans, expecting weakness. Instead, they had witnessed precision, intelligence, and resilience that few species could. After the failed provocation, the Council was forced to reconsider everything they had assumed about humans. They had expected fear, hesitation, and submission, but instead, they had witnessed calm, strategic, and precise responses. Humans had faced their drones, neutralized threats far beyond their technology, and done it without panic or aggression. The aliens could not comprehend it. Humans were showing qualities the galaxy had not fully seen before, and the Council began to realize that they were dealing with a species unlike any they had encountered. Humans themselves understood the importance of the moment. They knew that they had earned the Council's attention, but respect was still unclaimed. To demonstrate their capabilities further, the human delegation decided to show the aliens what humanity could do when not under immediate threat, but in conditions where preparation, strategy, and intelligence could shine. They invited the Council to observe Earth's survival simulations, scientific laboratories, and defense programs not as a boast, but as an honest demonstration of what humans had achieved through ingenuity and perseverance. The Council agreed, though with reluctance. They were curious, of course, but still cautious. They had assumed humans were small, weak, and primitive. They expected spectacle, not substance. What they found, however, challenged all their expectations. The humans led the Council through simulations that illustrated the history of human survival on Earth, how small groups had survived against enormous predators, how communities had built tools and shelters to overcome environmental challenges, and how humans had developed strategies to cooperate efficiently under extreme stress. As the aliens watched, they began to see patterns that were astonishing. Humans had learned not only to survive, but to thrive in the face of overwhelming odds. They had evolved strategies for coordination, decision-making, and problem-solving that were instinctive yet sophisticated. Their ability to assess risks, adapt to changing conditions, and respond strategically was far beyond what the Council had anticipated. Even species considered highly advanced in the galaxy struggled to match this level of practical intelligence combined with resilience. The humans explained their approach to survival and strategy with clarity and simplicity. They spoke not in technical jargon meant to confuse, but in plain terms that highlighted the principles behind their success. "We learn from every challenge," one representative said. "We study it, adapt to it, and plan for the future. Every problem has solutions if we observe carefully, cooperate, and remain calm. Fear does not help us. Understanding does." The Council was struck by the truth in these words. For centuries, they had relied on displays of power, intimidation, and hierarchical dominance to control and influence species. But humans had shown them that fear could be neutralized by intelligence, adaptability, and teamwork. This was a revelation. They were witnessing not just the survival of a species, but a species capable of evolving in real time to meet challenges, learn from mistakes, and improve strategies continuously. Humans continued to demonstrate their capabilities. In one simulation, they recreated a scenario of a catastrophic natural disaster combined with technological failure, situation that would overwhelm most species. Humans moved calmly, dividing tasks efficiently, anticipating problems before they occurred, and mitigating risks through quick adaptation. They made decisions collectively but decisively, ensuring that no single failure could cascade into disaster. The Council watched in awe and growing unease. Humans were not only surviving, they were excelling. The demonstration of innovation and adaptability continued in laboratories and research facilities. Humans had developed technologies to monitor and respond to environmental changes, systems to predict disasters, and methods to maximize efficiency in problem-solving. Each example revealed that humans' intelligence was not abstract, it was practical, actionable, and honed by necessity. The Council began to understand that humans' greatest strength lay not in raw power or advanced weaponry, but in their ability to apply knowledge effectively under pressure. The turning point came when humans showed the Council's simulations of complex strategic operations, similar to military planning, but with broader applications. Humans displayed the ability to predict multiple outcomes simultaneously, anticipate the moves of competitors or threats, and coordinate actions across vast distances. This level of planning, combined with the speed of adaptation, demonstrated to the Council that humans could handle uncertainty in ways that many galactic civilizations could not. The aliens began to murmur among themselves. They do not simply survive, they dominate situations through intelligence, one said. They anticipate, coordinate, and adapt. This is beyond ordinary resilience. Another added, and they do not panic. They remain calm, even when facing threats that would paralyze other species. That is remarkable. The realization spread through the Council. Humans were not only capable of facing threats, they could turn threats into opportunities to grow stronger. Humans continued their demonstration, showing that they were not reckless risk-takers, but careful observers. They explained how every challenge, every threat, and every failure had been an opportunity to learn. Their history, their culture, and their daily practices had all reinforced the ability to adapt, collaborate, and innovate. The Council began to see humans not as primitive, but as masters of survival intelligence, apex predators, in every sense of the term, not because of raw strength, but because of resilience, adaptability, and foresight. Even more startling for the Council was humanity's ability to unify under pressure. Unlike many species that fractured when faced with danger, humans collaborated seamlessly. They shared knowledge, divided responsibilities according to skill, and coordinated actions with precision. This combination of cooperation and strategic thinking created a force multiplier far beyond what their size or technology would suggest. The Council began to realize that humans' power was not only in what they could do individually, but in how they worked together as a species. Throughout these demonstrations, the human delegation remained humble and composed. They did not boast or try to intimidate the Council. They presented their history, knowledge, and skills as evidence of their resilience and capability, not as threats. Yet the effect on the Council was profound. The aliens could not deny the reality in front of them. Humans were intelligent, adaptive, cooperative, and fearless in ways that few species could match. By the end of the demonstration, the Council had no choice but to acknowledge a hard truth. Humans were not a species to be dominated or controlled through intimidation. They were capable, observant, and strategic. They could survive the most extreme conditions, adapt to unprecedented challenges, and turn even dire situations into advantages. The galaxy had assumed that humans were insignificant, but humans had quietly proven the opposite. The Council's leaders convened in private. Some were reluctant to speak, but eventually the truth emerged. We have underestimated them, one admitted. They are not simply survivors. They are thinkers, strategists, and innovators. Their strength lies in their intelligence, cooperation, and resilience. We assumed intimidation would work. It will not, and that makes them formidable. Humans, meanwhile, returned to their normal routines, confident but not arrogant. They understood the Council's growing respect, but they also knew that mutual understanding and negotiation would be more important than dominance or fear. They had demonstrated their strength, intelligence, and adaptability, and in doing so, had quietly rewritten the Council's assumptions about humanity. As word of the demonstration spread, both within the Council and across Earth, the perception of humanity began to change. Humans were no longer seen as primitive, weak, or insignificant. They were a species capable of adapting, surviving, and thriving under extreme conditions. They were apex predators not because of their weapons or size, but because of their intelligence, cooperation, and courage. By the end of this phase, a new understanding began to take shape. Humans had shown the Council that true power was not always about aggression, intimidation, or technology. It was about intelligence, resilience, adaptability, and the ability to act decisively under pressure. The lesson was clear. Humans were capable of surviving challenges that would overwhelm almost any other species, and they did so with calm strategic efficiency. The Council could no longer approach humans with arrogance or assumption. They had been forced to see the truth. Humans were apex predators in ways that the galaxy had underestimated. The demonstrations had not only proven humans' abilities, but had also quietly shifted the balance of respect. Humans had not raised weapons, shouted threats, or displayed aggression, yet they had made it unmistakably clear that they were not to be taken lightly. In the quiet moments that followed the demonstrations, humans reflected on what had been achieved. They had survived the Council's tests, turned intimidation into opportunity, and revealed their unique strengths without resorting to fear or violence. They had shown that their intelligence, adaptability, and cooperation were their greatest weapons, and that true power could be demonstrated through calm, strategic action rather than aggression. For the Council, the lesson was equally profound. They had assumed they could dominate a species through fear and displays of power. After weeks of tests, demonstrations, and careful observation, the Galactic Council finally came to a difficult realization. Humans were unlike any species they had encountered. They had assumed that fear, intimidation, and displays of overwhelming power would bend humanity to their will. They had assumed humans would hesitate, submit, or make mistakes under pressure. Instead, humans had responded with calm intelligence and adaptability. Each challenge had been met not with panic or aggression, but with strategic observation, careful planning, and coordinated action. The Council's ships hovered over Earth one last time, not to threaten, but to formally acknowledge what they had witnessed. Delegates from the Council gathered in a chamber designed for communication, where humans had once again been invited to participate. There was no show of force this time, no massive holograms, no intimidating projections, no threats. The atmosphere was tense but different. There was respect now, grudging but real. The human delegation entered the chamber calmly. Their presence alone was enough to demonstrate confidence. They did not shout, wave weapons, or demand attention. They walked steadily, observing the Council's representatives, noting their expressions, and speaking with clarity and simplicity. Humans had learned long ago that power was not shown through noise or aggression. It was demonstrated through calm, decisive action and intelligent decisions. The Council spoke first. Their words were measured, lacking the usual arrogance and superiority. Humans, one representative said, we have studied you, tested you, and observed your responses to threats and challenges. We came expecting fear and hesitation. We expected submission. What we have seen is something entirely different. You are resilient, intelligent, adaptive, and fearless in ways that are remarkable. The humans listened quietly, absorbing the words. They did not respond immediately with pride or arrogance. Instead, they acknowledged the statement with calm composure, demonstrating that they understood its weight. Their history had prepared them for this moment, not as a threat, but as a recognition of their strength. They had survived countless challenges on Earth, from predators and natural disasters to conflict and disease. This acknowledgement from the Council was a new form of recognition, but it was one that humans had earned through centuries of resilience and strategy. The Council continued, we have come to understand that your abilities are not only physical or technological. Your intelligence, coordination, and capacity to adapt make you a species capable of facing threats that would overwhelm others. You do not rely on fear, aggression, or intimidation. You learn, adapt, and act decisively. That makes you formidable. There was silence after these words. Humans did not interrupt, did not boast, and did not celebrate. They had expected recognition would come slowly, and they understood the importance of letting their actions speak louder than words. Their strength had always been in strategy, observation, and adaptability, and now the council was beginning to see it clearly. One human representative finally spoke in a calm and measured voice. "We are honored by your acknowledgement. We do not seek conflict, but we will never be controlled by intimidation. Our history has taught us that survival depends on intelligence, cooperation, and courage. These are the principles we live by, and they guide our actions." The council listened intently. They could feel the difference in approach. Humans were not aggressive or hostile. They were confident, intelligent, and unafraid. Their words carried authority without arrogance, strength without violence, and calm without fear. For the first time, the council realized that humans' true power lay not in technology or size, but in character, strategy, and the ability to respond to any situation with intelligence and precision. Across the chamber, the council began to shift its perspective. Some delegates, who had once assumed that humans would be easily dominated, now admitted quietly that they had underestimated the species. "They are not just survivors," one said. "They are apex predators, not because of strength alone, but because they combine intelligence, adaptability, and courage in ways that few species can match." Another replied, "And they do not react predictably. That is the most dangerous quality of all. They learn, they adapt, and they grow stronger with every challenge." Humans demonstrated their adaptability once more, not through words, but through a live simulation. The council had designed a complex scenario involving environmental hazards, technological challenges, and strategic decision-making. Humans approached it methodically, analyzing each element, anticipating outcomes, and coordinating their actions. Every decision was informed by observation and experience, and every mistake, though minimal, was corrected immediately. The simulation ended with humans achieving success in a way that was both efficient and elegant. The council could not deny the results. Humans had completed the scenario without fear, hesitation, or error, demonstrating the very qualities that had impressed the council from the beginning: intelligence, adaptability, cooperation, and calm under pressure. The aliens began to see that humans were not only capable of surviving, they could excel in situations that would overwhelm almost any other species. Finally, the council spoke again. "Humans, we recognize that we have underestimated you. We assumed that fear, size, and technological superiority would control you. We were wrong. Your intelligence, adaptability, and resilience are extraordinary. We acknowledge that you are apex predators, not merely on your planet, but in ways that extend beyond your world. We offer our respect and recognition." The humans accepted the acknowledgement with the calm dignity that had characterized their every interaction. They did not demand praise or seek advantage. They had simply demonstrated the truth that fear could not control them, that intelligence and adaptability were more powerful than intimidation, and that cooperation and strategy were their greatest strengths. This recognition marked a turning point. The council began to engage with humans, not as a species to dominate, but as a species to understand, respect, and potentially cooperate with. Discussions shifted from intimidation and testing to collaboration, knowledge sharing, and mutual understanding. Humans had proven their worth, not through aggression or display of power, but through intelligence, courage, and strategy. The implications for the galaxy were profound. Humans had demonstrated that true strength did not always lie in size, weapons, or technology. It lay in intelligence, adaptability, cooperation, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. A species that could survive, learn, and thrive in the face of overwhelming challenges could not be underestimated. Humans had quietly, but decisively reshaped the perception of their place in the galaxy. For humans, this was not about glory or dominance. It was about acknowledgement and understanding. They had faced challenges, observed carefully, adapted efficiently, and acted decisively. Their success came from centuries of learning how to survive, cooperate, and think strategically. And now, the galaxy had begun to recognize the lessons they had always known. Resilience, intelligence, and courage were their greatest weapons. As the humans departed from the final meeting, the council's delegates reflected on what they had witnessed. There was a new sense of respect, and in some cases, awe. "We assumed we could control them," one said. "Instead, they have taught us something we did not know, that intelligence, adaptability, and courage are forces that cannot be intimidated." Another added, "We have underestimated them for too long. That will not happen again." Humans returned to Earth quietly, continuing their work, their research, and their preparation for the future. They had faced the galaxy's most powerful entities and emerged not just unscathed, but respected. They had proven that intimidation could not sway them, that fear did not dictate their actions, and that intelligence, cooperation, and courage were their true strengths. The Council, now forced to reconsider its assumptions, began to establish formal channels of dialogue with humanity. No longer would humans be seen as insignificant. They had earned recognition through strategy, observation, and composure, qualities that few species in the galaxy could match. Humans had demonstrated that they were apex predators, not through violence or aggression, but through intelligence, resilience, and cooperation. The galaxy had assumed it could intimidate humanity. Humans had shown that they were calm, intelligent, adaptive, and fearless. The lessons were clear. Fear would not control them, threats would not sway them, and their true power lay in their ability to survive, learn, and act with precision under pressure. And as humans looked to the stars, they knew this was only the beginning. They had proven themselves not as conquerors, but as a species capable of facing any challenge with intelligence, courage, and cooperation. The recognition from the Council was not the end. It was a milestone. Humans had earned their place in the galaxy, not through fear or aggression, but through their enduring strength, adaptability, and unyielding spirit. The Galactic Council, once confident in its power, had learned a lesson that would resonate for generations. Underestimate humans at your own peril. They were apex predators, not because of weapons or size, but because of their intelligence, resilience, and the ability to thrive in the face of any challenge. Humanity had quietly, decisively, and completely rewritten the galaxy's understanding of its true state.